there are many problems in the field of Lyme disease, and I wanted to address one of the core problems that you may not be aware of. Some have called this the Lyme disease conspiracy. There's in this country a core group of university-based Lyme disease researchers and physicians whose opinions carry a great deal of weight. Unfortunately, many of them act unscientifically and unethically. They exert strong, ethically questionable influence on medical journals, which enables them to publish and to promote articles that are badly flawed. They work with government agencies to bias consensus meetings and have worked to exclude from these meetings and scientific seminars those with alternate opinions. They behave this way for reasons of personal or professional gain and are involved in obvious conflicts of interest. Some of them are known to have received large consulting fees from insurance companies to advise the companies to curtail coverage and any additional therapy beyond their empiric 30-day course. This group promotes the idea that Lyme is a simple, rare illness that is easy to avoid, difficult to acquire, simple to diagnose, and easily treated and cured with 30 days or less of antibiotics. The truth, however, is that Lyme is the fastest growing illness in this country after AIDS, infectious illness after AIDS, with a cost to society measured in the billions of dollars. It can be acquired by anyone who goes outdoors, very often goes undiagnosed for months, years, or even forever in some patients, and can render the patient chronically ill and even totally disabled, despite what this core group of physicians refers to as, quotes, adequate therapy. Long-term studies on patients who were undertreated or untreated demonstrated the occurrence of severe illness more than a decade later, reminiscent of the findings of the notorious Tuskegee study. Following the lead of this group of physicians, a few state health departments have now begun to investigate in a very threatening way physicians who have more liberal views on Lyme disease diagnosis and treatment than they do. And indeed, I have to confess that today I feel that I am taking a personal risk, a large one, because I'm stating these views publicly for fear that I may suffer some repercussions, despite the fact that many hundreds of physicians and many thousands of patients all over the world agree with what I'm saying here today.
They were working with it when it mysteriously popped up, and it can cause death. I have death certificates and a whole bunch of papers at home on that, but this one is United States Patent Office, and this is an invention, the pathogenic Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. Now this one is patented by the Department of Defense. Many people say that this is what the Gulf War illness, that's what these guys are suffering from, because they all have the In fact, 70% of any chronic illness in the world, I guess, has the Mycoplasma infection. If you're chronic, whether it's MS, lupus, Parkinson's, whatever. The next page is a PubMed article. Another strain of Mycoplasma was made. This was made from everybody's favorite island, Plum Island, and it's highlighted. You'll see that on your TV. Plum Island worked with mycoplasmas. They worked with infecting ticks. They've done everything you could imagine. This one I may not be able to put on the screen, but it'll be on the website. This is UTSA, $10.6 million lab. They're going to be working with biowarfare agents. They'll be working with such diseases as anthrax, tularemia, cholera, Lyme disease, desert fever, and other parasitic and fungal diseases. Now, Lyme disease is listed with some of the most deadly pathogens known to man. Another one, the CSU, biological warfare, says some season will call what they're working with spooky microbes, infectious bugs, and weaponized biological agents. Among them, anthrax, SARS, avian influenza, tularemia, encephalitis, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, chronic wasting disease, plague, yellow fever. It just goes on. So what's the attraction with this Lyme disease if they tell you it's a cakewalk, it's so easy to get, so easy to cure, I'm sorry. Now, this is New England Journal of Medicine. They wouldn't even respond to me. But I have a paper here, the long-term course of Lyme arthritis in children. The natural history of Lyme disease is not completely known. We studied the long-term course of Lyme arthritis in 46 children in whom the onset of disease occurred between 76 and 79, who received no antibiotic therapy for at least the first 4 years of the illness. Now, they're using the excuse that they didn't have a test, they didn't know what it was at that time. But the lab, I just showed you the lab they were working with, knew about it in 1975, 74, whatever. Down below, it says all 46 children had positive IgG antibody responses to Borrelia burgdorferi throughout the illness. So that's the Lyme bacteria. They tested positive for it. And later on, the people got sick later on, lingering, they had IgM responses. Were significantly higher than the IgG titers. Another reason why the CDC doesn't want to use the IgM. You can Google, I won't put this on the screen, you can Google this one. This is the Tuskegee timeline. Go into Google, type in Tuskegee timeline. This is an experiment that the CDC did on the black Tuskegee soldiers. This went from 1932, ended in 1972. And the experiment ended when they died. When they died, the experiment was done. And when this came out, the news media finally caught on to it. Now that we're talking about Plum Island and experiments and whatever, the next thing on your screen is a paper from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They were investigating a man named Eric Traub. Eric Traub had bought some land in Maryland. He was putting fuel tanks in, underground fuel tanks. I believe he had a generator. And if you read this, they were concerned that this guy was working to help overthrow the United States government. They felt that he was ready to help if there was an invasion into this country, that you would have fuel and radio and whatever they needed on this farm. So the next page, FBI, they're talking about, excuse me, they again installed more gas tanks, underground tanks. Subjects reported to have built a large home near the Frank DuPont estate, which has an airport. So they were concerned about that. The next page is, they're talking about Eric Traub being extremely pro-Nazi. So here's a guy that they were afraid was going to overthrow the United States government. The FBI, CIA were watching him because he's extremely pro-Nazi. Here's the papers that they brought him into the country to work at Plum Island. His job there was, one of the main things he did was infecting ticks. So this is the requisition to get him from Germany to the United States. Keep in mind, this is a guy that they're afraid is going to overthrow our government. They put him in charge of biowarfare on Plum Island. The next one is his photo, the National Defense Program, his photo, and his fingerprints when they brought him into the country. This is interesting. As you can see on your screen, I posted a $20,000 reward in 2003, I think. I canceled it. I pulled it in 2006, 2007. But it was interesting to see the emails that were generated. Again, thank you, Chris Newby, for the Freedom of Information emails that she filed, which took 5.5 years for her to get them. They had to censor everything. And in there, they're talking about the $20,000 reward. They were upset with me because I posted a reward. The only reason I did that was hoping the news media would say there's got to be something going on here. This guy's putting up 20 grand saying Lyme is not easy to cure. And I was really hoping the news media would do something, but they didn't. That was a big failure. So Hank Fader, we demanded that Hank Fader show us the test that they used to diagnose Lyme to say that Lyme is cured. That's why we were out there. We wanted him to come up with come up with a sign. I'm sorry, my brain's a little tired. They wanted him to come up with a sign, paper, document, whatever, explaining that Lyme is easy to cure. See what they're using, because we've already proven the Western blot is nothing. So this is from Phil Baker about the $20,000 reward and the protest at UConn. Why not take this as an opportunity to challenge them to provide unequivocal evidence to show those who believe that they have late chronic Lyme actually have a persistent Borrelia infection? Well, Phil, does it really matter if you have a persistent infection or chronic Lyme? That's like calling somebody a chronic alcoholic or a drunk. You still have an infection and you don't have a test to prove it. So you can't use the word chronic Lyme is not real. Here's one from Henry Fader from UConn. I think the key is to not debate the chronic Lyme disease science with the patient. We cannot prove the patient does not have chronic Lyme disease. So he's admitted we have no test. This is from Derlin Fish. This is a good one. This is how you treat your taxpayers. The battle cannot be won on a scientific front. Derlin Fish is admitting they don't have the science. We have the science proving that Lyme is not easy to cure. There's no test for it. The battle cannot be won on a scientific front. We need to mount a socio-political offensive, but we're outnumbered and outgunned. We need reinforcements from outside the field. That's a nice way to treat the people that are paying taxes. And this one is also from Alan Steer. There's one point that I would like to emphasize in untreated patients. He means people that weren't treated immediately, which is 80, 90% of the people, because your doctor can't see a positive test, you don't get treated. Alan Steer says, there is a chronic form of Lyme disease that commonly results in Lyme arthritis or in rare cases, Lyme encephalitis, Lyme, neurological Lyme.
I was a research scientist at the Lyme Animal Disease Center from 1960 to 1983. We worked to make covert biological warfare program even after Nixon ended all offensive aspects of the bioweapons program. We engineered human embryos and tested their resistance towards the enhanced diseases we created. The security conditions at the laboratory were not the best, and there were numerous instances of disease spreading to nearby communities, and we were responsible for all the cover-ups. The people have a right to know, and I have a responsibility to tell them what to know in there. Dr. Traub's initial research in Plum Island focused on the tick and their ability to spread disease to the enemy. Our team continued his research through the 60s and 70s. In 1975, a town called Lyme, Connecticut began to experience several cases of an as yet unknown infectious disease. The symptoms mimicked a variety of illness and a cause was difficult to ascertain. This disease is now known as Lyme disease, and it was the result of nearly 2 decades of our research at Plum Island. We released ticks infected with the pathogens to test out our biological warfare agent and study its effects on a population. The initial fatalities brought attention to the outbreak, and it led investigators in the medical community to isolate the cause of the disease by 1981. They later devised treatments for the infection. A research doctor from the World Health Organization was suspicious of the sudden appearance of a previously unknown disease and began to question our activities at Plum Island. This man's name was Dr. Herman von Buchholz, and his disappearance went unnoticed by the media. We could not risk having our biowarfare program exposed.